What up? What up? This is my mic. That's going to come in handy. I got some friends over here on Instagram Live. Hi. I'm recording for YouTube, but I thought I would invite my friends. I'm at Robin Black MMA on Instagram. Since we were on YouTube last, I was in New York City going to cover Bisping versus GSP. 400 or 450 people have subscribed to the YouTube channel. It really fucking means a lot to me. The idea that you're like, this guy, this weird fucking guy who obsessively wants to talk about fighting in a different way than we're used to, and that you've chosen that you'd rather get, or you'd like to, among the other things, get some of your MMA stuff from me, that means a lot to me. That really does. There are some questions popping up on my Instagram, but I will come to those in a bit. But it does. It means a lot to me. I'm obsessed with martial arts, and I'm obsessed with trying to peel back the layers deeper and deeper and see what we find. My very favorite fighter in the world is Cub Swanson. For a lot of reasons. I've studied... I've commentated about 450 fights before I went to China, or Russia, where I commentated 232 Sanda, which is full contact kickboxing with takedowns matches in 5 days. So I'm into fucking 5,000 fights that I've got to commentate now, and 20,000, 10, 20,000, 30,000 that I've analyzed. And yes, analysis for parts of my life and parts of how I've wanted to look at fighting was in detail, watching fights in different ways, in different settings, at different speeds, rewatching certain things, finding patterns and thought processes, technical aspects. And I think the fighter I've probably spent the most time on is Cub Swanson. I have spent a lot of time on Conor McGregor because he's different and because he's very noteworthy, and he's going to be a big part of the history of this decade, so that's inevitable. But for the enjoyment of studying the martial arts, Conor McGregor is a distant third or fourth or fifth to the pleasure of watching Cub Swanson. Because he's an artist, right? This is martial arts. This is not, to me, the sporting aspect is the way that I get to consume and watch and analyze and experience martial arts. So the sporting aspect to it, with that comes a lot of other aspects. But when it's at its purest, what you are looking at is two artists that are unwilling partners, each with their own agenda, trying to paint a picture or write a song or tell a story or tell a joke or any of these things, do a podcast, whatever, with dire consequences in real time, with improvisation and response and leading and pattern setting and controlling, and there's a massive psychological element. All of this is going on. And I think at the highest level to which the purity of combat is expressed, we have Cub Swanson. That's my belief in a lot of ways. And he's also a friend, and he's a good dude. He's a real good dude. Follow the guy on Instagram, and he's searching for martial perfection, but he's also searching to become a great human being. Father, husband, friend, whatever. And that's something valuable for all of us. So when we look at T-City, Brian Ortega, why is it T-City? Why isn't it O-City? You know? Yeah, Triangle City, right. Well, see, the thing about that is his last 4 fights are all finishes. I don't think there's a triangle in there. There might be one. There's 2 KOs, and there's, I think, a rear naked choke. There could be a triangle in there. But early in his life, he was a triangle specialist. He was somebody that was what he loved. The thing about the triangle is, when I was obsessively training jiu-jitsu, I've obsessively trained different martial arts as deep dives, both when I was fighting and because that's how I learn at my best, is I go hard into something and I go deep into it until I find answers. When I was first doing that with jiu-jitsu, I guess 2007, I saw fucking triangles everywhere I looked because I was much smaller than everybody, and they put me on my back. And when you end up on your back, and it takes a little longer till you really develop the ability to get back up and quality sweeps and stuff like that. Is there a triangle in his last 4?
Yeah, last year against Diego Brandao.
Diego Brandao. So his last 4 fights, 3rd round. Anyways, when you're training it deeply, especially early, if you find something that feels you can make a connection to it. For me, it was also a triangle. I just wanted to triangle everybody. Didn't mean I could triangle everybody, but I saw it everywhere. And then you started to see it in other positions. And you saw the triangle when you were on top and when you were passing, when somebody was passing you. And so it starts to become, it's everywhere. And it's everywhere in nature, too. The triangle is a powerful, powerful shape in nature, the support of those 3 things. Some people do it with omoplatas. Some people obsess about triangles, and then they find that, and this is early when you blue belt and you're just coming up, and then you are trying to attract triangles everywhere, and you see that the same reaction happens, and then all of a sudden you're not T-City anymore, you're O-City, you're omoplata city, because everybody's coming up a certain way and you just attack the shoulder. And or you start being an armbar city guy, or you start sweeping guys as they react, or because the reaction is what creates the chance, opportunity. Most overused word in language. Put that in your head for a bit, and now just start watching how much, mostly in television, and on the internet and in politics and stuff, how much people use the word opportunity. It's crazy. Or in fighting, commentary or analysis, anything. But so this guy developed from a love of jiu-jitsu, right? Brian T-City Ortega. Clearly, this man started to see it as a language and a music, and there's something so fucking beautiful when you start really connecting to a martial art. And I know that friends of mine who have deeply connected to yoga, and even people who run, people who have become big runners, they feel this like there's something else happening. They go somewhere else. And I was just in China after the commentating Sanda. I was commentating these sort of expressions of martial arts, patterns or taolu, a number of things. And when people do very slow martial arts movement, which a number of the internal Chinese martial arts have, you start to feel that they are in something. And I don't know how else to put it, that it isn't just, you aren't just doing something, you're in something, you're in a phase of something, or you're in an experience of something. And when you do jiu-jitsu at the highest level, and not that I've done it at the highest level, I have done jiu-jitsu for a decade, and I haven't worn a gi in 5 years, which I'd really like to do again. But I'm nowhere near like at the highest level, but I get to study people who do. And you can enter this flow. Yoga, people will tell you the same, and Cub enters that state accesses it beautifully when he's fighting. The difference for him, what he wants, is he wants to be in that state regardless of how the fight is expressed. So when you think of Cub Swanson, and if you are curious, if you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher, or if you're watching on YouTube, or if you happen to check it out on Instagram Live, look for a podcast I did on this. I started talking about Cub Swanson versus Brian Ortega, and I went off into how and why we still use terms like styles make fights 20 years later, and stylistic matchup, striker versus grappler, and so forth. That's a whole other conversation. But in truth, what Cub is looking to do is to flow his way through combat itself. Right? So when we think of him and we think of Cub be in a creative state, or we think of him as, an innovative fighter, or you see him at his best, flow state is the biochemical term that's happening in the brain. We think of him doing cartwheel kicks and coming off one hand and punching with the same hand and spinning and faking spins to land things, and really, in an old breakdown I did some years back, I guess now, before Do Ho Choi, I put classical music, something I've been doing for years. Watch fighting with classical music. You can do it with country. You can do it with fucking punk rock. You can do it with anything. It does change your perspective in a very good way. You see how truly jazz would probably be good, although I fucking hate jazz. The band Rush, We're in Canada. That type of prog rock, also somewhat interesting, but you connect a little deeper with the flow. So we think of Cub Swanson and we think of him throwing these punches and landing on guys with their mouthpieces flying and stuff. We see that when he strikes and when he moves his feet and when he punches and kicks and elbows and knees, but he's truly able to and looks to do that throughout. Because what the high-level artists do not do, regardless of how much we talk about it, on television shows or on Twitter amongst ourselves, they do not think in terms of, I'm a striker and he's a grappler, or we've got to make sure our takedown defense is on point. None of that is true. This is a flow between, and there are so much fighting takes place between standing, both my feet are on the ground, and being on the ground, where my back is on the ground or your back is on the ground or you're on 4 points. Part of my hand is down, or a knee is down, or I'm against the cage, or I'm on my way up, or I'm on my way down, or I'm struggling not to be taken down. So much of the fight happens there that actually is trained more in many gyms than standing or on the ground. But we don't talk about it. We just say, how was his takedown defense? It was on point. He stopped that takedown. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. Cub wants to be flowing through all of that. And I've watched him train in Albuquerque, and when he's on his flow game, playing with a jiu-jitsu player, it's the same as when he's striking. That's what he's looking to do. And if he is at his best, it's very difficult for Brian Ortega to do that in all facets. Because, I'm going to put this here for a moment. Look at this. It's a total coincidence. Chips. These are casino chips. And it is a coincidence. I remember they're there, but I didn't know I was going to talk about chips. Let's say you have this many casino chips to put into your bets where you're betting on your skills. And it would be nice if we had more, but let's say Cub's going to put all of them equally throughout training. Of course, he kickboxes a lot, but he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He does everything, his conditioning, plays with balance, diet, mental training, everything. So he's going to take these chips and distribute them evenly. Brian Ortega's life has consisted of this many in jiu-jitsu, and now over time, the remainder starts being applied to other places. And then, if this represents a month or a year, over time, maybe he'll do some of the greats, the great jiu-jitsu based guys, will take some of these chips and train a little less. It's kind of maintain, still be in there, but take some of that time and apply it elsewhere. So now instead of being fucking, 60% of his training is on what he is great at, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Betting on your strengths, doubling down on your strengths is absolutely a way to go about training in life, for that matter. Double down on your strengths. And deal with my weaknesses, slowly improve them, but let's not let my strengths slow down in their growth. Mark just made an adjustment there. So there might have been a jump, might not have been. So are we going to let this atrophy and build up my weaknesses, or are we going to make it in a way that, and this is that compartmentalized thinking, that if I can let's take this another way. This has become as good a striker as Cub Swanson. This is find the specialized ways to hack that so that rather than having to fight with him as well in the open field, I have a few hacks and traps to close distance and get him to the ground. Get so good at some specialized stack that I make it more about that and these become irrelevant. Do you see what I mean? Where we're actually choosing how we're going to improve our skills. Because all of these guys are improving constantly. All of these guys are finding different ways to constantly improve. But you can't improve everything forever. You have a limited amount of time and mental energy. You need to rest a certain amount. There are limits, or else everybody would just be able to slam dunk a basketball in a month and just keep working on it and slam dunk a basketball. Might take you 2 years. Might take me 5 years to slam dunk a basketball, but I could fucking slam dunk one if I committed my life to it. However, if I'm busy doing that, I don't know how good a piano player I can become. Makes sense, right? I want to become a great chef also. It's like there's a certain amount of mental energy required. So does Brian Ortega? go and start applying that to being great at everything the way that Cub has approached his training? Or does Brian Ortega say, it doesn't matter these things that you may be better than me because I got this answer that I'm sure will work, that where I close distance a certain way, lace your leg when I do it, and you start specializing that. And it's not wrong. It's not wrong. But what happens is once he gets into the areas that he hasn't become ultra comfortable, that's when he's not flowing. That's when he's not free. That's when it's a little bit, there's a lot of thinking going on. There's a little bit of panic going on. So that's what Cub Swanson makes it about. Cub Swanson makes it about freedom. Cub Swanson makes it about the flow. Cub Swanson makes it about, water can flow and it can crash. And he go and feels out, finds his way into those cracks, finds himself in a spot that he doesn't really like, stay with that and flow his way out of that. Whereas T-City has to force that water somewhere. We want it all to go into that spot where I'm a master. And so you see this conflict in approaches, and it's not just conflict in game plan or strategy or fight approaches, but philosophical approaches to building their entire game, them as a fighter, their approach, their collection of skills, everything. And it's fucking cool. It's really fucking cool. So I'm looking at it right now to try. I'm just going to send this out to both guys. On Sunday morning, I'd love to sit down and chat with you guys. I'm not 100% set yet, but I'm commentating TKO, 5 title fights at the Bell Center in Montreal the night before, which I believe is December 8th. I think this fight's December 9th. And I'm thinking about flying down to California the morning of December 9th just to see you guys fight. Because I'm still the world's biggest fight fan, and fans buy tickets to sporting events and fucking rock concerts and shit. So it depends how I'm doing for money personally, not business-wise, but my own money, as to whether or not I can do that. But I could get TKO to fly me. Instead of flying me home, they could fly me down there. So, and I probably got a friend I can crash on his hotel couch, so I might be able to do it for one-way plane ticket from California to Toronto. We'll see. I want to come see this fucking fight. But my friends, this is a brilliant fight, and it is a brilliant fight for the same reason that every fight is a brilliant fight, because they're two completely different individuals made up of every choice and decision and choice of how they're going to commit their time and what they're going to sacrifice and what they're going to learn and how they're going to put all that together to be as brilliant as possible in the moment. And those two conflicting collections of choices and commitments and decisions and training systems and thought processes are all going to meet in there. Do styles make fights? Yeah, 100% of the time. If there's been 20,000 fights over the last, 8 years or 10 years, I don't know how many there is a year. There's 50 to 100 shows a year if you include the small shows. 100 shows a year. There's more, but we'll call it 100. At 10 fights each is 1,000, is 2,000 fighters. So for 10 years, 20,000 fighters. So all 20,000 fighters, 100% of the time it was styles make fights. So we don't need to ever fucking say that again. You can either say it every single time or never say it again because it's ridiculous. We don't say the same things about shit for our whole lives. But it's going to be a beautiful fight. I can't wait to see it. And who's going to win? I don't have a fucking clue. But when Cub's on his game right now, he's one of the very best in the world and one of the most beautiful to watch him fight. And if this thing goes into the third round, that fucking dude has finished 5 guys. Of his 5 finishes, all have happened in the third round. He believes he can do it. He knows he can do it. This is a different level. And if it goes to the 4th or the 5th, he's never been there either. But I'll tell you, if I'm fucking T-City and I'm his guys, I'm Henner and the rest of his team, I'm saying if you can finish him in the 3rd, and then you can absolutely finish him in the 4th or the 5th as well. It's going to be a killer fight. But if you're interested, go back and listen to my ranting on iTunes or Stitcher. And subscribe to our podcast. These are my friends on Instagram. It's at Robin Black MMA. And we'll be back with 5 or 6 things this week and 5 or 6 things next week. I don't know if I mentioned, we're here at Budo MMA in Apex Road in North York, Ontario. And we're going to be here We're going to be here for the next few weeks at least. Thank you. Blackout.